Well, let's not do something that's heavily regulated. Let's make sure we have recurring revenue. Let's make sure it's highly scalable. So you always learn.
Absolutely. And there was a point in my time where I came up with 6 attributes of key elements that I needed my businesses to have. Recurring revenue, global, online, product, not service, and on, right? Stuff like that. And you realize after a while, that list keeps growing. Hello, everyone. Binoy Tamang here by myself this time, and so excited to bring my friend Ken. Ken and I are actually on the same advisory council board for a mutual friend of ours in his company. And I found Ken, and I think you're going to love Ken as well. And we're just going to have a great conversation. Ken has started multiple businesses, continues to do so, and is currently in his successful company called ContractSafe, and he'll tell you a little bit about it. But Ken, thanks for being on here. We got so much to talk about and a great conversation. Thank you very much. Much appreciate you.
Happy to be here. I am looking forward to another hour of Zen with you because you're so calming. I always find myself so calm when I talk to you.
Hey, my back's out. My back's out right now, and it's thank you. Thank you very much. I got to get my phone and put it on stun right now. Hold on before he acts up again. Okay, here we go. Thank you, Ken. You're at ContractSafe, and you started that almost 9 years ago. And before, I'm reading your background. You currently also have a boutique advisory firm. But amongst the many other things you did, you also started a solar company a long time ago at the very starts, Barango Solar, for 7+ years. So Ken has gone through a lot in this sequence with a training in legal, and having worked in the law field for a while, you made a change. So before we go there, Ken, tell us about ContractSafe. Tell us about the background of why you started, where you are now, because then everybody who's listening and watching, they can get excited about catching up on where you are today.
I am happy to. It's a fun project, and it was born, like a lot of good business ideas, out of my own frustration. So as a practicing attorney, as an entrepreneur, I just had experienced all the pain points around managing legal documents. It's never top of mind for entrepreneurs, but then you blow a date or you get into diligence and your deal is held up because you can't find things. There's just little thorny nuisances, and I had these challenges. I went looking for a nice, easy solution to help me, and it didn't exist. There were a lot of big enterprise scale solutions, super big, complicated, expensive, but there wasn't anything easy and affordable. And so my co-founder, business partner, and I built ContractSafe to address that market and that pain point.
Wow. I'm thinking, as you were sharing that, I'm thinking about a couple of legal specific software companies out there that made a big name. But the fact that you couldn't even find something for a smaller shop, it's fascinating, isn't it? How we still find so many gaps and holes and pain points. And I know that our listeners are doing the same, our watchers, they're finding the same, and they're trying to get in. Tell me this, when you started this off, did you start with your own money? Did you start with zero? How did you start this up?
Yeah, so it's an important question because we were very, very fortunate in that we didn't have to raise money when we got started. We were able to bootstrap it, and that was important to us, in part because of our experiences having raised money in the past. We like the idea of controlling our own destiny. And so that was a big part of our early days, and it really informed a lot of how we operated. You know, we were very lean. We moved very quickly in the early days, and I think it was a big part of our success as well.
I bet it is, and many have, myself included, seen the pitfalls of any time cash comes in. As much as you're desperate to meet payroll and to make sure things work out, sometimes those jaded eyes look over the telltale signs of what's going to come with that money. And I've had enough pain. I've had investors screaming at me for and demanding the budgetary layout of how it's going to be deployed and whatever. When I realized, oh my goodness, angels and friends can sometimes be devils and real anchors to the success. And then I went on to VC money, and I realized, oh no, with it comes a whole other bunch of issues. And I know that we could spend the entire discussion today, because of our cumulative experience, just on that topic. There's so many people out there. The fact that you did it on your own, well done. Well done. It takes grit to be able to suck it up and not take any of that money and to redeploy, right?
It does. I mean, I think one of my learnings from this, and one of the things that I think is so amazing, exciting for entrepreneurs, is that for a whole bunch of reasons, the barrier to entry for new businesses is so much lower, right? I mean, just like the introduction of AWS and Azure, so you don't have to go buy millions of dollars versus, of hosting equipment. The speed at which you can develop applications because of different new application, programming languages. There's just all of this innovation has reduced both the time and the cost of getting to market. And that just, I mean, for entrepreneurs, that's so awesome, because you can try stuff, and it just opens up a whole bunch of possibilities that didn't exist previously.
It's a true statement. And before I forget, because we had a brief talk before we pushed the record button, with Varango Solar, there is also this whole topic of, we've got new technologies and things, but there's also a topic of being a little too early. I had a business that I started, and it was pre any of the grocery companies providing digital coupons and ability for mothers to save. And it was called Shopping Nanny. And what we did was we just aggregated all of the collective digital and paper-based information into an Oracle database, and allowed membership at $6 a month. And we had a thesis that said, hey, $6 a month will at least save you 10 times that amount with your monthly grocery budget. Long story short, we were just a little too early and a little too undercapitalized, because we had great signups and such, but we needed probably $50 million in order to explode it, right? Explode it and go. And then Groupon came right after that, and this, and then the actual grocery chains themselves started making their assets digitally available in a convenient form factor, which we were doing, but they did it better because they were bigger. It was just too early. Tell us about Varango, because people here are also trying to make sure, product market fit, can we get there? There's something about timing that's important too, right?
Yeah. So my partner and I, we started a residential solar business in 2008. And let me give you two elements of timing there. So first of all, we did it by acquiring an existing business that we wanted to use as a platform. The challenge from a timing perspective was that we acquired it in early 2008, and it was a home improvement business. It was a specialty contractor. And 2008 was a long time ago, but basically the whole real estate market collapsed about 6 months after we bought that business. And that business that we bought was struggling almost right out of the gates. And that was a terrifying moment. Like, holy Jesus. And, we managed to survive through that, in part because we just had no choice. You entrepreneurs always face challenges. Nothing goes as planned, really. And you just keep going, and you do. And in this case, we did. We pivoted to solar, which was the key of our strategy anyway. And we then built that solar business to over 100 million annual revenue, 1,400 employees operating nationally. And so it was a super rewarding business. It was one of those do good and do well businesses, right? The good part of it, which my partner and I are really passionate about, is the sustainability element. Yeah. And so we just, it was the kind of business where you could get up every day and feel really good about what you were doing. But it was early, and it was a very hard business, highly regulated, no recurring revenue. So it was really pushing the rock up the hill. And so, a lot of learnings from that business. And you can connect some dots directly from that business to ContractSafe, because when my partner and I got back together with ContractSafe and said, what's the next adventure? What's the next project? Well, let's not do something that's heavily regulated. Let's make sure we have recurring revenue. Let's make sure it's highly scalable. So you always learn.
Absolutely. And there was a point in my time where I came up with 6 attributes of key elements that I needed my businesses to have. Recurring revenue, global, online, product, not service, and on, right? Stuff like that. And you realize after a while, that list keeps growing.
That's right.
That list because we were talking about and laughing, because the scar tissues, that a term that I got from last week's talk with Greg Butterfield, we keep getting these scar tissues, and we keep realizing there's always something more to learn. There's always something new, a pain point, a bloodied area of the wall where we've hit our heads. I thought I'd figured things out already.
Yeah.
But there's always a new one. And that's one of the things I'd like to share too, is that I think we are smarter in consecutive startups with the confidence and the knowledge of the past. But it does not mean that we stop bruising our heads, bashing our noses against a new problem, because it keeps coming. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it doesn't, the challenges are always going to be there. I mean, in any business, particularly startups, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's the daily challenges that are thrown at you. I do think with sort of, maturity and with experience, you gain a little bit of wisdom, and it helps you deal with those things as they come. You have a perspective, at least I have a perspective now that I didn't when I was just getting started in my entrepreneurial journey. But the challenges are always there. That's just inherent with business. If it was easy, everyone would do it.
Absolutely. Hey, let's go there about the learnings, because our listeners will want to know. Let's give it to them straight. What are some of the learnings, as you said, older, having gone through it? I'll tell you one. I've learned to have a longer range perspective of the calamity and the worry that I'm currently suffering. I immediately think that the sky is falling. It's going to be nuts. This is not going to work out. Nowadays, I go, oh, it's that worry again. We're not going to die. I can see that it's going to work out. I just have to take this lump in stride and play the long game. And that was something that I didn't know the first time. maybe even the second time, right? So share any of these, what you've learned about now having done multiple startups.
Yeah, I think there is something that is really important about consciously trying to remain on an even keel. And it's for your own good. If you have a team, then it's also for the benefit of the team and the organization, because it doesn't help anything to be volatile. There are highs and there are lows, and the trick is not to get too high with the highs and not too low with the lows. I've thought a little bit over time about this odd personality mix that I think is suited to entrepreneurs, which is a macro optimist and a micro pessimist.
Oh, lovely.
So you have to have this sort of belief, this macro optimism that things are going to work out. Otherwise, you would never take the leap on these businesses to begin with. But you also, I think, to succeed, you have to have a certain level of paranoia and drive to face the details and push and so it's sort of this a little bit of an odd personality mix, but that's the best way I can frame it. When I think back on my journey.
Beautiful. Wow, I really love that. I couldn't agree more. And one of the things I've learned in this sequence as well, it's kind of interesting that I have burned both ends of the candle to make things happen, and yet the more I dug in, it was almost like quicksand. The worse it got, and so I realized part of the solution for me, at least for me, was whenever things looked dire and it was a major problem and it was, DEFCON 4, it was better treated by actually taking a break, by actually exercising, by actually having a date night with the wife, by deliberately getting away from it, allowed the heart palpitations to drop, for the mind to clear from the teeny narrowing of the light at the end of the tunnel. And all of a sudden, just that break, that pause, allowed the vision to kind of come back and go, oh, okay.
Yeah. And meditation helps too.
Meditation too. I've got a few things you're saying. Yep. What other advice would you give to first-time founders, and what you think will happen as they encounter the roadmap to eventual success? Sure.
So, I mean, one, and not everybody is fortunate in this area, but I've had a partner, a co-founder for my journey, and that has been amazing and a huge part of our success. And this is a buddy of mine from high school. He and I have known each other forever, and we have complementary skills. But I think even more than that, to have somebody who, you can bounce things off of. When one person is down, the other person might not be, and can kind of help even those things out. And who you have total confidence in from a trust perspective. No alternative agendas or anything like that. That's been a really, really fun part of my ride, and I'm super grateful for that. Not everybody is fortunate enough to have that kind of a person who's available. If you do, I'd recommend it because it's super helpful. But if you don't, I definitely would hope that entrepreneurs out there would find somebody or multiple people who they can talk openly, who have some experience in the area and don't have a stake in the fight, right? Because who do you talk to about this stuff, right? I mean, you need somebody hopefully a few people that you can talk to as sounding boards who are totally disinterested. They're not investors, they're not employees, they're not spouses. There's somebody who's totally independent that would help give you that voice.
That is wise counsel, but that also tells me a little bit about you, Ken. Partnerships are almost always fraught with risk. I have seen so many, as you know, I coach mostly tech CEOs, that the history is strewn with bodies of partnerships that have fallen apart. Actually, not during the tough times when they've had success. That's when the colors truly show up. And yes, you can also have a lot of negative friction with the wrong partner. So choosing the right partner is an art form. It's an art form. I have had partners, different partners, in my four companies from scratch, and 3 were existing teams that I got to be a lucky member of. But to choose the right partner is critical, because you said you need to fully trust them, know all of their motives and such, because you never know. And I have seen too many times, especially greed pop up, personal lives that may not have been complete. And so when the stress and the need for oxygen is so intense, that people start acting very unnaturally in order for self-preservation to continue. They'll steal from their partner. They'll take investor money that otherwise was completely isolated and bound for working capital. The whole works. And then when success comes, it's gone to their head and they've gone nuts. I share this story for everyone to hear because I've seen it. I've seen it too many times. And luckily, my partnerships have been like you. I chose, thankfully, with God's help, wisely. I have continuing relationships with all of the past partners, and it's been good. But man, you can make the worst decision with a bad partner. Never mind the business model, right? It can completely implode the whole thing. Even if the business is cranking, life is hell because you've got the wrong partner. So I'm just putting a little bit of juxtaposition that it's essential, I think, but be so careful when you choose that partner. Lucky you, right?
That is good counsel. You don't want to jump into these things loosely. Deliberate diligence, lots of conversations, make sure there's alignment. That's all super important.
I even went so far as to make what I called a divorce, an annulment paper with each one of my partners before we actually had the operating agreement signed legally and stamped, because I realized what could go wrong. And I think that was part of the key success, to have these discussions and say, Ken, if this happens and this happens, what would you do? How would you think this through? Let's just go through this. Now, we're only doing this for an instance, but if we do this, I promise you that the preparatory work we're doing will help us way down the road when things get really intense and there's a lot more at stake. Right now, it's a fictitious stake, right? And that helped a lot for me to nail it, because I had different partners. You had the high school friend, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if lawyer, you understand.
Well, I was going to say, if you go see a lawyer to draft up those agreements, they will ask you, how do you want to handle the buy-sell terms, which is that's like the breakup language. What's the process? What's the economics and all of that? And so that's really smart. It's smart to think about that stuff in advance, not because you hope it goes there, but because you don't want that kind of stuff to totally derail the business and people's lives if there's a need to separate, right?
Absolutely. There is no doubt that starting a business is all-consuming. You've done it multiple times. How do you do this ethereal work-life balance? You've got 2 kids. How What's been your key to keeping your sanity and to keep the business going and yet still have the family flourish? What have you done?
Yeah, this has been a bit of an evolution for me. Maybe that's an understatement, but I started my career as a practicing lawyer at a big global law firm. And that culture is very different than certainly than the way that I operate today. Think old school.
Yeah.
When I was practicing, it was just, the people who succeeded were the grinders. The harder you worked, the better. And the culture was very single-minded. And over time, I've grown a lot, just through experience. I mean, part of that is just how do you manage the stress, and that's nothing revolutionary, but meditation and yoga and things that, frankly, if my younger self, I don't think ever would imagine me doing, but it's been great. The other thing that I learned over time was that concept of just work harder. That's not the recipe. I mean, or if it is a recipe, it's not the recipe for the dish that you want. I mean, as I got a little more experience and then I had a family, I realized that carving out the time for personal relationships, for family, it's super important. And frankly, as entrepreneurs, we have this luxury where you can control your schedule to a large extent. You have flexibility. And so, the way that translated for me was that when my boys got to the age where they started playing sports, I coached their little league team, and I went to their games when they were in high school. And I was really grateful for that I had the flexibility to be able to do that. Because if I had been, if I was still at a big law firm or if I was in a corporate job, I don't control my schedule. I may not have been able to do all those things. And really, what are we doing all this for? Right. I mean, and so, I think it's become a lot more popular, frankly. I think the world has changed a lot. That notion of just outwork everything is fading. You look at like Tim Ferriss, who I really like, I mean, he's, what really put him, out there was the 4-hour work week. Now that's also a mythology, because if you're starting a business, there's no such thing as a 4-hour work week. But the idea is good, right? Is to be smart and thoughtful and optimize.
What a beautiful explanation. What you just told me was you actually, because of the experience, the nose to the grind of a typical startup, a new employee at a big law firm, because of all that experience, you didn't want to go through that at all. And so you started your business with enough perspective to keep some balance from day one. You are wise. I went the classic way, nose to the grind. I spent too many hours at work with the business, with starting up a business, until, like you said, experience catches up. And I don't remember a light bulb moment, but I realized that I couldn't turn it off. I just couldn't turn it off. At home, whatever. Vacation, long weekends with the family, you could see me in the corner like this, furrowed brow, not being present. And for all of you listeners, I'm sure you know this feeling when you're just thinking, and it's exciting, and it's all consuming. And so one of the things, and I want to tell you this, one of my partners was incredulous that we had just signed the sell agreement. And I did what I almost always did through prior companies. I took one of my kids and some friends, and I went to Mount Everest base camp.
Wow.
That was one way back then, even though it was coming on, you could digitally disconnect and be so far away that the mind finally started to simmer down from all of that. You'd be
Yeah.
outside in nature and just fantastic vistas, right? And I had to come up like you, meditation, yoga, exercise. I had to go far away, halfway around the world, just to get some downtime, have some perspectives, and come back with, oh, okay, I can do this better,
Yeah.
and tackle things. But I think it's absolutely essential to have that perspective either before or very quickly during the startup phase, because it can wreck you. It can absolutely derail you, mentally exhaust, emotionally deplete you, and you have no reserves to really do a great job at building a business, never mind building the family and everything else. Anyway, just share that with you.
Yeah. And I don't, it's not just the founder, by the way, you know, as we've, like in our solar business where we had a big team, we would look out for this with our managers, you know, because we've all seen it, right? Everybody gets a certain amount of vacation every year, but you have people who never take it.
Yeah.
And that's not good. It's not good for them. It's not good for the organization. We used to, you know, I don't say we didn't force people to take vacation, but it was highly encouraged.
So true. So true. It's amazing how the rat race in the entrepreneurial world, there's a little bit of, you know, something the chest that I work X and I'm building this. And so this harried lifestyle of just zipping around all over the place really actually isn't effective. And I plead with all those who are listening, who are first timers, sharpen the saw, be very astute as to where you focus your talent and your time, and you can move the needle so much quickly, so much more effectively by being that much more intentional than it is, I gotta, everything depends on me and so forth. In the journey, at least, that's what I've learned, and I'm sure you have as well, right? As we go through this.
For sure. I mean, you know, I think that, you know, look, this was the case with me when I was younger. There were things that were more ego driven than they are today. And so, you know, and as a practicing lawyer, I saw this with my clients who were startup founders, is, you know, how much money you can raise, how many people are you hiring, your office, you know, do you have a fancy corner office? You know, these are things that at some level they satisfy the ego, but they're not really the drivers of your business success. And I think, you know, and you've been through this journey as well, right? With a little bit of experience, you start to see some of those things that are ego driven are actually shackles. They're things that are making your life harder and slowing you down and creating more, you know, more choppiness than
necessary. Yeah, absolutely. In ContractSafe right now, I think you told me that you have a remote business with employees remote, correct?
Yep.
How has that been to manage, to lead, to inspire, to measure? Tell us about that, what you've done to make it work. Because I have many clients right now still struggling because of COVID and pandemic, having to almost, you know, deliberately push them away. And now they want them back, but they can't because there's a portion that don't want to come back, and nor do they want to force anything. You probably started this off remote from day one. What have you learned? What advice would you give?
Yeah, so our story is probably more typical of the folks that you've talked to. We were, you know, we had an office in Los Angeles before COVID. We did have some people who were remote, but our plan at that point was to build around our LA office. And then COVID hit. After a little while, we gave up the office, and then we started hiring people remotely. And started seeing the benefits of doing that. And for us, one of the really big benefits is the time, managing time zones and the ability to have people in different time zones. We have a pretty big customer base in Europe. And so having people, I'm based in Los Angeles, having people on the East Coast was very helpful. And just the ability to hire the best athletes, the best talent from wherever they are has been great. And yeah, we did have some concerns. I mean, certainly, we've talked to other folks and we've read a lot about challenges. We thankfully have not seen a lot of that. It's I would say that it's on balance been a huge benefit for us.
Wow.
I do think one of the things that maybe a little bit that we've thought about is, I think there is something particularly difficult about hiring really junior people, like maybe right out of college, and trying to get them integrated and trained remotely. I do think that's a little more challenging. We haven't really faced that challenge because we tend to hire people, who are more mature and more experienced. And maybe that's part of why it's worked for us. It's just not part of our model to hire a lot of young people. But in general, I'm a proponent.
I am too. That's a really good insight, that you're already hiring people who have developed the skill set, the discipline to contribute, regardless of where they are. And the first timers would need a lot more socialization, a lot more training, hand-holding, reinforcement of the core values multiple times, much more so. That's really insightful. Do you have any of your employees overseas at all?
Not employees. We have full-time contractors.
Okay.
Who are overseas, but just a small number.
And just for the benefit of our listeners, isn't there a point where even in the US, when you have different employees in different places, as true employees, different tax rates, different benefits, are there any things that you have to do to accommodate a person in Georgia versus Maine versus Washington State?
So yeah, certainly from an administrative compliance perspective, there's a lot of stuff that has to be done. We use a PEO, and so that insulates us from all of that work. And maybe if I could maybe ladder up a little bit on that, our philosophy in general is that we want to own the things that are strategically important to us. So that's development. It's the core part of marketing, sales, and customer success. We want to outsource all of the other things that, frankly, we don't need to build up a center of excellence around. And so this is just part of that strategy. We've worked with a PEO from the very beginning. We have experience working with PEOs in the past, and it just allows you to spin up very quickly and to handle all of this administrative stuff that's not value added. The negative is you do pay a higher fee. There's a cost to it. And so there is a certain point where when you have enough employees, the fee becomes so much that it makes sense to bring it in-house. But we're probably going to stretch that because we don't want to be spending the time on that stuff.
Valid point. I love that. As much as you can, I love to focus on the strategic areas that will add value. Everything else can be outsourced. Good philosophy. I concur. It's a good strategy. I remember a long time ago, someone said, no, you must get all of your developers to be in-house. I said, you know what, at a certain point, yes. But until we get to that critical mass, right now, we're just in the early stages. Let's just go get whatever help we can, beg, borrow, steal, just to get to that certain stage. And then if it's producing revenue, then let's outsource formally. And then when it hits a critical mass, bring it in. Yeah. Bring it in. It's a cycle of doing what you can because economics dictates it, even though culture and strategy and execution is almost always better in-house.
Mm-hmm.
Startups, we don't have. That's why it's a startup. We don't have all the resources. That's why I have to do that.
Right.
I like what you said over there. At the same time, though, how do you keep those who are inside but out of state in different places? How do you keep them all marching to the same tune? How do you communicate them to such a point that there is minimum loss of translation and minimal fumbles during the handoffs intra-company? How do you do that?
Yeah, it is a great question. I don't know if we have a perfect answer for it. But the bottom line is a lot of communication. And so for us, that means we do offsites, all hands offsites. So we get the whole team together twice a year. That's really valuable time. And so we try to make good use of it. And then
sorry, again, do you actually physically have everyone in one place? Everyone flies in?
Everyone flies in twice a year.
Like where? Like what have you done? Where have you met?
The last one was in Vegas. The next one, which is coming up in a few weeks, is in Chicago. And so we try to adhere to the one flight rule. So we're looking for locations where the most number of our people can get there with one flight. And that's again, it's invaluable because we're growing, we're adding new people. So every time we do this, we have new employees who are coming in, meeting everybody in person for the first time. It's a good time to talk about strategy and planning and culture. Really good time for checking in on culture and laying plans for the future around that. And then beyond that, I don't think we're doing anything particularly special. Frankly, we do weekly and monthly calls with the team. I also find that Slack is actually really good at this. It's sort of like the electronic water cooler. Everybody's there. There's a lot of it's not just work and task based. There's other stuff that we do there. Add a little personality, tell people what you've been up to. People post their vacation pictures. And so Slack is helpful as well.
Fantastic. That's a great tool. And
we can give Slack a little, I should get a discount for the promotion for them, right?
With a little love, we should share it. You're right. I have many colleagues who have remote teams, and they have said, like you, physically getting together to actually touch, feel, see each other at least twice a year seems to be a common theme. Those who are growing faster and have added cash, they may do more than that, or they may do more than that based on departments getting together big enough that it warrants that. You're
right.
Absolutely right. There's that chemistry, and yes, you can see a person on screen all day, but when you get to see that person live, it's a different action and reaction. And I agree with that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
As we go through this balancing act, you've talked about PEO and you talked about outsourcing, all of those elements. At a certain point, there's also been what I call cleanup that happens. Every time I've started a company, you do what you can with the bare minimum. You kludge together this and that, and an Excel table for customers for this, and then something else for accounting. And after a while, you get this big old hairy mess. And yet the company's growing so fast now. Oh, we better get as much as we can clean data. We're going to have finance.
Clean data. Is there such a thing as clean data?
I know. I laughed as soon as I said that. You knew. We called it the one source of truth, if we could have it, right?
Right.
But it's invariably a rite of passage that there is someone who will have to clean up to be able to move to the next stage. Have you encountered that in the past? What did you do to clean up your databases and different sources?
Yeah, so look, if you're fortunate enough that the business takes off, this is just a part of it. And I think it's like it's a stages thing, right? The amount of time that you can allocate to that cleanup, the engineering teams would call it tech debt, is calibrated to the stage of the business, right? In the early days, you're just flying around, building the airplane in the air, trying to make something, trying to sell something, right? I mean, that's not your primary concern, and it shouldn't be. But you know, like with ContractSafe, that's a bit of the phase that we're in now. It's actually a lot of fun. I mean, I call it scaling up. You know, we're clearly not a startup anymore, but we're growing the team, and we're revisiting a lot of those processes and a lot of the infrastructure and some of the code as well. And because we have more resources now, we can allocate a little more time and energy to going back and shoring up some of the things that need it. And, you know, again, to me, that's a very healthy, fun part of what you're doing, because you're creating, you've got the flywheel turning, it's gathering momentum. And now what you're doing is enabling the next phases of growth. If you don't slow down a little bit and do those things, you know, the wheels are gonna fall off as you go through the next stages of growth.
Congrats that you're growing. I have seen this regularly, and I may be actually talking to the very person, but I found that most CEOs, most founders have a hard time hiring the right sales leader. It's an important topic, and I have talked to many other investors, board members. It's pretty touchy, because all of a sudden the main engine and oxygen is abdicated to someone, not the founder, to be able to lead. There may even be a drop in the actual closing ratios, because it's not the founder and the title of CEO, but it's not scalable until you find the right leader, not the person in the strategy box of CEO. And so when that happens, you hire someone where you look at all of their resumes and all of their logos that they've got, but they're very good in that role because they know what to say. And so invariably, the dance to get the job almost consistently is disappointing in execution, when it comes to execution, because they don't execute according to the dance. They spun a great tale. And I see this all the time. The VP, the CRO, whatever the title is, it's a very tricky find. Now, with all of that preamble, you may not have had that, but you can see why, right? That it's a very difficult handoff,
Right.
to make it happen. How about you at ContractSafe? How have you handled that? What are you doing, if not you being the main engine?
Yeah. So, you know, the general topic here is hiring, which is always an art, right? I mean, meaning it's imperfect. You can do the best job imaginable in a hiring process, and you still have a healthy risk of it not working out. It just, you know, there's never perfection. You know, you always, you know, you get better with experience, like a lot of things. You try to be diligent, but it's, you know, it's never perfect. And obviously a sales leader is really important to the business. And so that brings a certain heightened sense of importance to the hire. With ContractSafe, this was sort of a banner event for us, because I had been running sales myself. And that is not my core competence or my background. And so I was actually really excited when we got to the point where I could fire myself as head of sales and hire somebody who really knows what the hell they're doing. And And we did, again, just, a little bit about, as the nature of our scale now, we did have the luxury of going out and using a really good recruiting firm that had a lot of experience in finding sales leaders. And they brought a good slate of candidates. At the end of the day, we found that we've had a new sales leader who's been on board a little over 6 months and is doing fantastic. And the thing that really stood out from the recruiting and the hiring process was, we really leaned on culture as the decision maker. And because we had candidates who were very accomplished and who interviewed well, to your point, and who had the experience, on paper to do the job. But we had one candidate who we just felt like was super, super strong on culture and would be a great fit with us, would be a great fit for what we need. He was not the most experienced candidate that was in the pool, but we just had such a sense of confidence in him because of that cultural fit that it ended up being a pretty easy decision, and it's going great.
Congrats. I loved your answer, using culture as the main mitigating element, and having made the right choice 6 months ago that he's already producing. Congrats.
Thank you.
I have seen too many war stories. I know one particular company that has gone through four leaders in the same amount of years. And that is tumultuous. There's no way you can get enough momentum. That's just too much. And plus, they almost always bring in their own past relationships, directors, whomever they felt comfortable with. It can be a negative churn in many ways. So
for sure,
I'm so happy you got there. We always run out of time. Always run out of time. Ken, if you were to think of, we have first-time tech founders listening, people who are trying to start their business, people who have already met a measure of success. If there's only one thing that you can think of, one advice, one story of the past, what could you share with this team that says, Ken Button has done this, and this is what I would advise that everybody consider? What would you say?
Boy, there's a lot running around in my head right now. So one of the things that I really reflect on that I did not do a good job early on in my entrepreneurial career was, just not being in a hurry. So there's like this mythology in the startup world that, you have to have built and sold your first company before you're 22 years old or you're a failure. And sure, that happens, but it's rare. Yeah. It's not reality. And so my co-founder and I, we have a mentor, a very seasoned, very successful entrepreneur. And he said to me one day, and it always sticks with me, he said, it's okay to get rich slowly. So it's not a race. And this connects back to some, part of our conversation earlier where, it's not every business is built for venture capital, where you have to be a rocket ship. You have to raise as much money as possible and run as hard as you can. You can have a great business that is not institutionally financed and is not, in the headlines every day, but it's a fantastic business and it's great for you and it's great for your family and it's doing good. And that's good. That's a good outcome. And so, I know that when I was younger, I was impatient. I wanted to run hard at success and kind of work hard to get there, thinking that harder work was the key. And you know, I appreciate the advice that I've gotten from folks about it's a process. And by the way, I started, you know, after shifting from law to entrepreneurship, I was older than most entrepreneurs when I started. And that was a benefit for me. You know, I had experience that was helpful in the next stages. And so, anyways, I guess if there's a lot of directions I could have taken that, but that's really something that I reflect on and that I talk to my kids about.
We have not received that counsel. It's so wise. I wrote it down. Thank you. I agree completely. I have seen so many happy, fulfilled lives that don't require the adulation or the marquee highway billboard that touts everything has to be done and conquered and killed and filleted before breakfast. It just seems like you're right. You're absolutely. It's an unnatural, unattainable, and to a point, it creates a myth that it has to be done. I couldn't agree with you more. And in fact, I think people are happier if they don't have that mindset. If they're more balanced. I love that. It's okay to get rich slowly. I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for your wisdom and for this great hour. Again, you've been a great host, guest. And as time goes on, I'd like us to have further talks and little, insights as we come along the journey together. Continued success, Ken. Continued success.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to have these chats. I do feel calmer now, as I predicted. My hour of Zen up.
You're too kind. You're too kind. Oh, we were talking, listeners, about this fictitious Zen feeling that Ken has around me. So stop it. We're going to close. Hey, everyone. Right. Thanks for tuning in. Ken and I are going to sign out until next week. Just keep tuning in, share, like, please, and comment. We appreciate you, and we wish you the best on this journey. And Ken, thank you so much, Mr. Button. You are a terrific and a kind man at that. Appreciate it. Until next time, everyone, we're going to sign out for now.